All right, good evening, everybody. How did the homework go? Okay. All right. What I'd like to do, at least one, maybe two of those. I'd like to do, there's an investment one. Kind of want to go through that since that was kind of unlike one we've been doing in class. And I would also like to do one other, and I can't remember which one, but let's do the investment one first. So let me turn on the dock camera here. And this one is on page 105, and it's number 17. It says, George Rifkin is considering investing some or all of a $60,000 inheritance in a one-year CD paying a fixed 6%. You can tell this book's old, no CDs pay 6% anymore. Or a venture capital group project with a guaranteed 3% return, but the potential of earning 10%. George would like to invest the minimum amount of money necessary to achieve a potential return of at least $4,000 and a guaranteed return of at least $2,000. Formulate a mathematical model, recommend an investment strategy for George. How much of his $60,000 can he keep for his personal use during the upcoming year? Okay, so like we always have been doing, we want to identify the three main factors. So I'd like you guys to help me do that. So the main factors are what? What are our decision variables? What are we trying to decide on behalf of George? What are we trying to decide? Well, can we change?
Just put the CD or the venture capital.
Very good. So the decision variables are CD, and we'll say that's the amount of money to invest in CD. And the venture capital fund we'll say is VCF, and obviously that's the money to invest in VCF. Okay, so those are the decisions, and you can imagine, you know, if you've ever selected your 401k funds or met with a personal financial planner, this is, you could have decision variables, you know, 18 funds maybe to allocate your money between if you're looking at a 401k. So this is a kind of a simplified model. What are we trying to optimize in this case? Make big or make small? You're trying to optimize what? Not in this one. This one is...
minimize the amount of money.
Yeah, George wants to get a certain return, but he wants to minimize the amount he has to invest to get that return, right? He wants to keep liquid. So what we're trying to minimize is the amount he invests. But remember, God bless you, we always have to state this in terms of CD and VCF, our decision variables. So the amount we invest is really CD plus VCF, right? Or X1, X2, whatever you guys called that, yes? So if this is the deal, if we have no constraints, the solution is invest nothing and nothing, and you know, we minimize our investment. But we want a guaranteed return and we want a potential return. So first off, the guaranteed return is at least 2,000. So when I hear the word at least, I know it's greater than 2,000. Okay, that's at least greater than 2,000. And the guaranteed return on a CD is 6% because it's, you know, guaranteed because it's a CD and it's backed by the FDIC. And the venture capital fund has a 3% guarantee, which I don't think you'll find that very much in a venture capital fund, but a 3% guarantee. And then for the potential, we want at least a $4,000 potential. And the CD is always going to be 6%. There's really no risk to it. And the venture capital fund is 10% of what we put in there. What else? So what else? That makes sense. What else do I need to put here?
The max investment.
How would I write that? You're right, Eric. What is that? What would that look like?
CD plus VCF less than 60,000.
Yes. So It's probably a redundant constraint in this case, meaning it's not going to be binding, it's not going to hold us back, but we should include it because that's a real life constraint, right? If somehow the person comes in here and says, I want a $20,000 minimum return and a $40,000 potential return, if we didn't have that constraint in there, it would say, okay, here you go, invest, $800,000 here and $700,000 here, but that can't be because they only have 60,000. Yes. How about non-negativity or integer constraints? We haven't done integer constraints, so we probably doesn't need that, but we should say CD and BCF greater than or equal to 0. We can't invest negative monies. They don't have to be integer because money for is not integer, right? You can have $0.17, that's called 17 cents. So even if it's 0.175 cents, well, penny doesn't mean much, so you can round up or round down, right? So that is the model, and that is what you would have to create, on the in-class portion of the test. If you were given this word problem, this is what I'd expect you to give back, right? You've identified, you successfully modeled that word problem as a constrained optimization model. Does that make sense? So that would be the 3 things I checked. Boom, boom, boom. And that's a 5 out of 5. I grade your problems out of 5. Now on the take home, what we really want to test is not only that you can do that, but that as you do that, you can solve it in Excel. So let's solve that one in Excel. And instead of creating something, I'm going to create a brand new workbook. I'm going to say CD, and this is venture capital fund. I'm going to just seed it with 1 and 1 each. So that's where my decision variables are going to live. I'm trying to minimize, and CD plus VCF, well, the coefficient there is 1 and 1. So I need to sum product that with my decision variable, C2, D2, C4, colon, D4. And I know I'm going to reuse this formula, so I'm going to make that absolute, the C2, D2, and hit enter. Okay? I'm going to skip a line, subject to, and this is my guaranteed returns, G guaranteed. And the guaranteed coefficients are 0.06 and 0.03. And I'm going to copy my sum product formula down. And that has to be greater than or equal to 2,000. My potential coefficients there are 0.06 and 0.10. Copy the formula down. And that has to be greater than or equal to 4,000. And the max investment, max money, I'll abbreviate like that, 1 and 1, has to be less than or equal to 60,000. So if I change my investment, and this is a good way to test your model, let's make sure everything in column E is changing appropriately, and it looks like it is. Okay, if I invest $20, I'm going to get 90 cents back, guaranteed, potential of $1.60. You may want to put that in currency if you want to make this better looking. But anyways, okay. So let's tell Solver where everything is. So I'm going to go to Data. I'm going to go to Solver. In this case, I want to minimize E4. I'm trying to minimize my total investment by changing variable cells C2, D2, and I don't know how I changed that percentage accidentally, but I'll go back and fix that. Subject to the constraints that E6 through E7 has to be greater than or equal to G6 through G7, add. And E8 has to be less than or equal to G8, add. Making unconstrained variables non-negative, that's my greater than or equal to 0. I'm going to use simplex LP. Just validate everything looks good. Minimize E4, changing C2, D2, E6, E7 greater than or equal to G6, G7, E8 that looks good. I'm going to click solve. Solver finds a solution. I'm going to keep that solution. I'm going to make that currency, which is what I should have had in the first place. Anytime you see pound symbols like that, that means the number doesn't fit. So all you have to do is make that wider. I'm going to go between E and F and double click and it'll auto fit. So this tells us that George, if he wants 2,000 and 4,000 guaranteed, 2,000 guaranteed and a $4,000 potential, he should invest $19,047 in a CD and $28,571 in the venture capital fund. That is a total of $47,619.05, and that will get him those guaranteed dollars, so how much walking around money does George have? This is what he really wanted to maximize, I guess.
$12,380.
Sure, so if we said equal G8, as we'll do it this way, G8 minus E4, that's how much money he has left over, right? Now, this is kind of, you think about it, if we create this as very variableized, where things were variables, maybe the next customer would look at, they say something like, I want a guarantee of 3,000. Let's say potential of 8,000. Now I'm going to solve this, and I really don't have to change anything, but it's going to say, solver could not find a feasible solution. Now, why is that? Why is it infeasible? Think about it. Why is that infeasible? You can explain mathematically, or you can explain like real life, right? Why is it infeasible for Dr. Miko to get a yacht? Because my spending has to be less than this value, and the yacht costs this much, right? Those two things don't converge, right? And that's what's happening here. We only have $60,000 to invest. There's no option that gets me that $8,000 potential, right? Because I only can get 10% on the best thing. So there's no place where all those points come together. You know what I mean? There's no solution that meets all those constraints, and that happens a lot. So that means I have to relax the constraints, and I could, that's what the original one was, 2,000 and 4,000. Okay. So any questions on that? All right. What other one would you guys like to do? I'll choose one, but I'd really rather you choose one. If you struggled with it, I'm sure other people struggle with it, so please ask. You're doing everyone a benefit. How about number 10? Oh. The only thing I don't like about number 10 is I have to say Moo Town Buffet and Cow Chow several times. But we'll do number 10. And this is a good one to choose because we've done a lot of production mixes, right? We've done a lot where we're manufacturing something and we want to maximize profit. Well, it's good to see like a portfolio model, which is what we just did. And this is called a diet minimization problem. So let's look at this one. This is number 10 on page 103. And let me see if I can zoom in. All right, Charlie Judd is a salesman for Futura Farm Foods, which is currently marketing a feed for dairy cattle called Moo Town Buffet. On a recent visit to Norfolk, Nebraska, Charlie called on Dan Preston, a successful dairy farmer with a herd of 100 cattle. Dan's success is due in part to a rigid diet he feeds his cattle. In particular, each cow receives a daily minimum of 100 units of calcium. So when I see daily minimum, you should start thinking, hey, that sounds like a constraint to me, and it is. So, the calcium, I'm just going to write that down so I have it, has to be greater than 100 units, whatever we measure that in. 20,000 calories. Calories has to be greater than 20K. And protein has to be greater than 1,500 units. Okay. To accomplish this regimen, Dan has been giving his cattle cow chow feed. Each ounce costs 0.015. and supplies 1 unit of calcium, 400 calories, and 20 units of protein. In contrast, each ounce of Mootown buffet feed would cost Dan 2 cents and supply 2 units of calcium, 250 calories, and 20 units of protein. How much is Dan Preston currently spending to feed a dairy cow each day using cow chow? All right, so let's see, cow chow. So that's the first thing. This isn't really the problem itself, but we will need to look at cow chow. And let's see, cow chow, write down my units here, gives them cost 0.015 cents per ounce and supplies 1 unit of calcium, 400 calories, and 20 units of protein. So we need to look and say, all right, if I'm just feeding them flat cow chow, to get the calcium I need at least 100 ounces, because there's 1 unit, I need 100 units. To get the calcium, or the calories, which is 20,000, we need at least, what would that be, 50, right? And to get the protein, we would need at least 75. So to get all three, we need at least 100. 100 times a penny and a half. I think I'm saying $1.50 per cow. Is that what you guys got? Okay, so 100 cows, that's 150 bucks per day. 365 days a year, you can do the math. Okay. If we fed them just the Mootown buffet, said it cost 2 cents, and we get 2 units of calcium, 250 calories, and 20 units of protein. So that would be 50. That would be, what's that, 40, and that is 75. So I need 75. 75 times 2, still $1.50, right? That you guys got? Or did I screw something up? What did I screw up? What part did I screw up? Oh, this is 80, right? Yeah, so 80 times 2, $1.60, or 160 per day. Okay. So that's our current options. It's either $150 a day or $160 a day. But Dan says, what if we, these things must be mixable. What if we mix them together? Is there a way to provide them with, all the calcium, protein, and calories they need, but yet minimize cost? Okay, so that's what we're looking at doing. And this happens in a lot of different situations. You think about like pharmaceuticals, they blend things together, cuts of meat, anytime any kind of blending operation lends itself to this. So let's figure this out for Dan. What are our decision variables? What are our decision variables for Dan? Very good. So how many ounces of cow chow and how many ounces of Mootown buffet? So you guys know what those are, right? Ounces of each. Okay. What are we trying to optimize in this case? Maximize or minimize? Not maximize profit in this case. Not minimize total investment. We're trying to minimize cost. Okay, very good. So minimize cost. Every unit of cow chow is $0.015. Every unit of Mootown buffet is 2 cents. So remember, we concentrate on the coefficients. 0.015 cc plus 0.02 mtb. That's what we're trying to minimize. When I went through there, there definitely heard things that we had to have, right? Things that we had to adhere to. And those were the constraints, right? Those were the constraints. And what were some of the things that had to happen? What did we need? At least what, Sarah? Okay, so first thing, we got to get at least 100 units of calcium. Every ounce of cow chow provides 1 unit. Every ounce of Mootown buffet provides 2. So once again, concentrating the coefficients, 1 cc plus 2 mtb. You guys with me? So that's the calcium. What else do we have going on? Sir? Okay, so we need at least 20,000 calories. That's the current diet I'm on. And let's see, 400 cc plus 250 mTB. That's the calories. And the last one is the calcium. And I think in both of these cases, they both provide 20 units. And we have to get at least 1,500. Oops, 1,500. And CC, MTB has to be greater than or equal to 0. I wouldn't do an integer constraint because I could mix fractional ounces. I don't know if I'd go that crazy with this, but I want to avoid using integer constraints when I don't have to. And I think we were able to capture everything, right? Cow chow, moo town buffet. This is a diet problem. So this, if this is the in-class portion of the test, good. That's a 5 out of 5. Sir?
Would that be protein for the last one?
Yes, it should be protein. You're right. Thank you. Okay, so let's go to Excel and let's make this happen. And in the interest of time, I'm just going to rip off the one I built here. So I'm going to, right-click on that and rename this. And this is a Rifkin investment, I guess it was. And I'm going to hold down the control key, click with my left mouse button, drop it after there. And I'm going to rename that as Charlie Cow. Okay. And I only have the 2 decision variables, which is good. So I'm going to say this is now cow chow, this is now moo town buffet. I probably want to get rid of, I'm going to get rid of all the dollar signs, and I'll put them back when I get there. And I'm going to start out 1 and 1. That's extra, I don't need that. I want to focus on those coefficients. Remember, the coefficients are what matter. And looks like 0.015 and 0.02 for what I'm minimizing, 0.015 and 0.02. And these are currencies, so I'll make them currency. God bless you. This one is the calcium, so I'm going to change that to calcium. And the coefficients were 1 and 2 respectively. And that has to be greater than or equal to 100 units. The next one we did was calories. And that was 400 and 250 respectively. And that has to be greater than 20,000. And the last one is protein. And those were 20 and 20. And that has to be greater than or equal to 1,500. Okay. So I didn't have to change a whole lot in this model. Now, just by changing this operator, it didn't actually change it in my solver. So I'm going to have to go in there and make sure. And I think anytime you rip off a model, you want to do that. You want to make sure that you still captured all those changes. So we're minimizing E4. That looks good. By changing cells C2, D2, that's good. E6, E7 greater than G6, G7, that's good. But this one should be greater than. So I'm going to click on it. I'm going to change it. And I'm going to change the sign to greater than or equal to. I have make unconstrained variables non-negative. I click solve. Found me a solution. I click OK. It says if I mix 50 units of cow chow or ounces and 25 ounces of moo town buffet, I'm going to meet all those requirements. I'm going to get 100 units of calcium. I'm going to get more calories than they need. I'm going to get more protein than or as much protein as they need. And I'm saving on the best case scenario, the worst case scenario, I'm only saving 25 cents a cow per day, but I have 100 cows, so that's $25. times 365 days. I guess the cows eat every day. And if you put it, these kind of changes, these small changes over the units of maybe tens of thousands of cows and a whole year, we're no longer talking about thousands of dollars. We're talking about hundreds of thousands of dollars and millions of dollars. So this kind of analysis can be very, very useful. Now, one thing that he may say is maybe the calories are too many. Maybe instead of this, I probably would have a range for things, right? So I'd probably say, let's just take calories for example right now. Let's say, I want my cows to get somewhere between 20,000 and let's say 25,000 calories. Well, this model doesn't work for that right now. It's giving them 26,250 calories. So how can I make that model work so that it stays in that $20,000 to $25,000 range, 25,000 calorie range? What would I do? It'd be another constraint, right? I could say, so I would say this is min calories, but I'd have a max calories. And it would look very similar. 400, 250, but this time it has to be less than or equal to 25,000. Now just because I put it here doesn't mean Solver knows about it, so I need to tell Solver, hey, I got a new constraint. Click add, I'm going to say that E9 has to be less than or equal to G9. I click add, I click cancel, and before I solve, what's going to happen? What's going to happen? Is the price going to go up or down? It's going to solve it. Is the price going to go up or down? It'll go up. Why?
Because we can't max out the calories. It's going to cost more because we have to use a different, we have to divide a different household approach.
Anytime I add a constraint, right, a binding constraint, and it's going to be binding because, hey, it was violated last time, right? It's 26,000. You think about what that does, it makes my feasible region smaller, right? So if it makes my feasible region smaller, well, there's no way I'm going to be better, right? There's no way I'm going to be better. So if I click solve, I found the solution, but now it goes up. It's $1.29. It's not as good. It's not, but now it's in that range, right? It's in that 25,000 between 2,000 and 25,000, 20,000 and $25,000 range, 25,000 calories. Okay. So any questions on that? You guys did these okay? Start doing them a lot faster, I'm sure. And I think, as you do more and more of these, and we're still going to do some more tonight, we're going to add on to this. But what you'll see is, you start thinking that way. You start thinking that way. You start thinking in terms of those three things. What can I decide? What am I trying to make big or small? What am I trying to optimize? And what am I bound to? What is the things I have to do? Those go into constraints. So, a lot of situations in life follow that, right? I have to employ these 10 people. We have to, they each have to work this many hours, but I'm trying to minimize my cost. And these are the things I can decide, who to work, who to put on this project, who to put on that project. So as a manager, you're always constrained, and you're trying to work within those constraints to come up with the best decision, the best solution. That's what this is all about. All right, so I'm going to save this because we're going to come back to this. And I'm going to save this. We'll come back to it. I'm going to use a different one to walk through the new material. So let's go to the material by chapter. so let's go back to chapter 2. And then we're going to use the space ray and zapper model to kind of walk through the concepts. All right, so we went through this slide last week. We said when we do linear programming, we have to adhere to several assumptions. We have to take these as true, and we talked about that, hey, we violate those in practice. So we're saying, why do we do this? If we are building a model that violates what happens in real life, how good is the solution? Well, tonight, what we're going to talk about is sensitivity analysis. And sensitivity analysis is saying, okay, I have a solution, but I want to analyze that solution. I want to take it a step further and say, well, you know what? We have some things baked into this model that aren't quite right. How does that impact, if things were not quite right, how does that impact this final solution? Does it change? When would it change? How much would it change? Those are the things we want to look at tonight. So we're going to use this example that we talked about, I think week 1 maybe week 2, I can't recall. But we talked about a production mix model where we're Galaxy Industries, we're making 2 squirt guns. We're making space rays and zappers. We know those are what we're trying to decide between space rays and zappers. We make profit of $8 per dozen and $5 per dozen for space rays and zappers respectively. We have 1,000 pounds of this special plastic. We have 40 hours of production time. Those are things that are holding us back. We also know that those buggers in marketing say don't make more than 700 dozen total. And they want to keep a good mix, so they say make sure that the number of dozen space rays cannot exceed the number of dozen zappers by more than 350. So that was the unit we looked at. We solved that a few weeks ago. But we're going to take a look at it today. We're going to take a look at that today, and we're going to say, let's solve it. But after we solve it, we want to ask a few questions. And that's where the role of sensitivity analysis comes into play. So I'm going to take that. All right, so the role of sensitivity analysis of the optimal solution. So sensitivity analysis applies after we have an optimal solution. So the questions we might ask as a manager is, all right, we have an optimal solution. Is this solution sensitive to changes in input parameters? Right now, for example, in the space ray, we're making $8 per dozen for every space rays, $5 per dozen for every dozen zappers. What if that changed? Would that change my mix? So is it sensitive to changes in those coefficients? Right? Is this solution still the solution if it goes from $8 to $10, or if it goes from $5 to $4? We want to know that. Okay, that's something that we want to know. Possible reasons for asking parameter values used were only best estimates. A dynamic environment may cause changes. What if analysis may provide economical and operational information that we can use in other decisions. We're also going to look at something called the range of optimality. Okay, the optimal solution will remain unchanged as long as the objective function is in this range. So let's put this into perspective. So if you guys want to do this with me, it might make better sense. So if you go to material by chapter, chapter 2, you'll see space ray zapper linear program. And it's the solved version of it. Okay, so open that up. And it looks like this. So if I go to data, solver, solve. This is 1,000. This is 25. I must have a bad version there. So this is, we have 1,000 pounds of plastic, 2,400 units of time, because remember it's 40 hours at 60 minutes per hour. I think our marketing constraints look okay. Our profit was 8 and 5 respectively. And if you remember when we solved that, we said make 320 dozen space rays and 360 dozen zappers. All right, so the first thing we're going to look at is these coefficients. We currently make $8 per dozen for space rays, $5 per dozen for zappers. But what if we're wrong? What if we end up making $7 per dozen? What if we end up making $9 per dozen? We're asking the question is this solution sensitive to changes in those coefficients? How we look at that is by something called the range of optimality. And we have to get another report that goes along with this solution. So click Solver, resolve this thing. Make sure it says Simplex LP at the bottom. Okay, make sure you're using Simplex LP. Click Solve. And when it comes back, it gives us some reports over here. You guys see this on the right-hand side? Before you click OK, click on the sensitivity report. And click OK. And you'll see now we have a separate worksheet that provides that sensitivity report. The first thing we're going to look at is the range of optimality. Let's define it, and then let's analyze it. The range of optimality is the range where the optimal solution will not change as long as those coefficients are in there. And we have to assume no other interactions or any input parameters, that there's no interaction between that $8 and $5. So Excel doesn't do a nice job of giving this to us. We kind of have to interpret it. Right now, for example, with the space rays, the coefficient is $8. Okay, you guys see that? The current objective coefficient is $8. We have an allowable increase and allowable decrease. The allowable increase is $2, so let's add $2 to that. And the allowable decrease is 4.25, so minus 4.25. So this gives me $3.75 on the low end to $10 on the high end. What this is saying is, if that $8 is anywhere in that range, if I was only making $4 per dozen, it's still right to make 320 and 360 dozen respectively. If I'm making $9 per dozen, 320 and 360 are still the right mix. $10 is still the right mix. If I go to $12 per dozen, I don't know. Okay? So let's test that theory out. The range of optimality we're saying is 8 plus 2 is 10. 8 minus 4.25 is 3.75. So let's go to the solution and let's change this to $9. If that range of optimality is right and I resolve this, what should happen to this 320 and 360? It should not change. Let's resolve. It does not change. If I make it $10, is it in the range of optimality? Let's try it, resolve it. I think it's probably right over the line. Let's make it $9.50. Click Solver, solve. Okay, it stays 320, 360. If I go down to, let's go down to $4. I resolve it. Stays 320, 360. But if we go beyond that range, either this side or that side, let's go to $12. What's going to happen when I resolve with 12? It's going to change the mix. Okay? And envision what's happening here. I know this is from last week. Remember, those constraints defined a feasible region that looked like that. Do you guys remember that? And all these points, these were interior points, never the solution. Boundary points may be a solution, right? May be a solution. Extreme points, if there is a point, it always is a solution. So what's happening is when it was 8 and 5, if we change those coefficients, it changes the slope a little bit, right? Changes the slope of that profit line a little bit. But if we change it a lot, well, it's no longer touching this point last. It's moving to a whole nother point. Does that make sense? So why is that important to me as a manager? Well, if I go to my boss and I say, make 320 and 360 dozen, she might say, well, you know what, that $8 per dozen, I'm not sure. We might not make that much. We might be off. And I could say to her, well, even if it goes the whole way down to $4 or $3.75, that's still the right mix to make. And now I have more confidence in that solution, right? I know my profit changes, but that's still the right mix, and that's the thing I'm deciding at this point. Does that make sense? So if we look at, let's look at the zappers, okay? And let's put this back to where it was and resolve it just to reset things. And let's look at zappers, because this was the sensitivity report for the original solution. So for zappers, my objective function coefficient is $5 per dozen. The allowable increase is $5.67, so let's say it's $10.67. The allowable decrease is only $1. So the range of optimality for this guy is anywhere from $4 to $10.67. Let's go back to the original solution. If I put a 9 in here and I resolve, what should be the result? Is this going to change? It is not, because it's in the range of optimality. But if I put a, let's go to 11 in here, is the solution going to change when I resolve it? It's outside the range of optimality. There's something up in there. What did I say, 12, right? Well, that's good. Answer. Yeah, I don't know. But anyways, in that range from the $4 to $10.67, the solution does not change. What does change? The mix doesn't change, but what does change? The profit changes, right? Because I'm changing the coefficient, so it's going to change the profit accordingly. Okay, so that's the first thing we want to analyze, the shadow price. I mean the range of optimality. Let's go to the right hand. So go ahead.
Can you change either values at the same time, or are they independent?
They are not. We have to assume no interaction. So if we change them both, you know, like reduce 1 by 1 and 1, it kind of multiplies the effect, right? Because think about it. Well, the slides probably do a better job than my drawing. If you look at it, what's happening, you know, that's where the last point it touches, right? When the profit line was 8x1 plus 5x2. If I change it one value, you know, it's going to change the slope. If I change the other value, it might change it a little more extreme, right? Because it's factoring them in independently. So I hit next, and then finally, you know, that thing becomes the optimal point. Okay. What if you would see, good kind of thought here. What if you would see an allowable increase and allowable decrease that were real close to 0, or 0 themselves? What do you think that means? You saw an allowable increase real close to 0, allowable decrease real close to 0. meaning any change at all, and we have a different optimal solution. What situation do you think makes that happen?
You're on a boundary.
Very good. So if my solution is right on the boundary, right on the boundary, it's saying any little change, like tick it this way or tick it that way, one tick this way, one tick that way, no longer is this going to be the solution, this is going to be the solution. So if you see that, if your allowable increase and allowable decrease is nearly zero, why might you want to know about that other solution? Because you might say, well, you know what? Even though that other solution isn't as optimal, it might be more beneficial to me in another way. Maybe it makes someone else happier, right? I have a solution that's damn near as optimal, but it has another benefit that I wasn't able to model. Does that make sense? So we want to look at that even when those numbers are very small. All right, so the other thing that I might want to consider is if we look at our model, and I'm going to resolve this thing just to set it back to where it was, 320, 360. What are the things holding me back? What are the things holding me back right now? Okay. So as a manager, what would you ask? I know those are the things that we call they're binding because we're solving them with equality. But as a manager, what might you ask if those are the things holding me back? What if we got more plastic? What if we got more time, right? Well, let's look at the sensitivity report, and we're going to analyze something called the shadow price. Let's go to the slides, let's look at the definition, and then kind of see what it makes sense, okay? A shadow price is this. Assuming there are no other changes to the input parameters, the shadow price represents the change to the objective function value per unit increase to the right-hand side of the constraint. I know that's a mouthful, but let's actualize it, see what it means. So the shadow price for, I think, let's see, I should have put the units on this. It's better if you put them out here because it'll capture this. So I'm going to put time, marketing, and resolve it. Now it'll show that. Okay, so it captures the label to the left of the constraint. So on the right-hand side, we use all our plastic. The shadow price is $3.40. What that means is if we get an additional unit of plastic, our profit's going to go up by $3.40. So let's change that 1,000 to 1,001 and resolve. It goes from 4,360 to $4,363.40. Alternatively, if we lose a pound of plastic, it goes down to 999, and we resolve, the profit is going to go down by that $3.40. Does that make sense? Now, do you think we can keep adding plastic forever and ever and ever and get $3.40 added to my profit? Do you think that makes sense? Why? What happens? Very good. If I start getting to a certain point, I start bumping up against time holding me back or marketing holding me back, right? So we want to know that, hey, what that shadow price does is $3.40, but we want to know where that shadow price is valid for. And for that, we need to analyze another something called the range of feasibility. And the range of feasibility is this allowable increase, allowable decrease. So for plastic, it's 1,000 pounds. The allowable increase is 100, so that's 1,100. And the allowable decrease is, if we see that, that's like infinity, right? That's 1. Every time you see an E, that's like scientific notation. This is 1 times 10 to the 30th. So that means the whole way to negative infinity. So every extra pound I get up to 100 pounds will get me another $3.40. So let's check that out. So I have 1,000. Let's say I go to 1,050. All right, we should be good. Our profit should still go up by 50 times $3.40, like it did. We go to 1,100. Should go up by $340. Click solve. Looks like it did. But if I go up over that 1,100 threshold, okay, we're at 4,700. Something else there. I think I'm still getting more profit, but I'm not getting $3.40. So the shadow price and the range of feasibility work in concert with one another. So any change to the right-hand side of a binding trait will change the optimal solution. Any change to the right-hand side of a non-binding trait. All right. Assuming there are no other changes to the input, we'll change it. Okay. So this is what's happening when we relax a constraint. When we relax a constraint, what happens if you think about visually, it relaxes the feasible region, pushes that out, and when it pushes that out, we can also push the profit out accordingly. So that's what we're seeing happen with the shadow price. Let's cover one more thing and we'll take a little break. All right, so the last thing with the shadow price is we understand what it is, but we want to interpret it correctly. And we have to think about shadow prices as premiums above what we normally pay. So if we look at this solution, we would probably say, how much would I be willing to pay for an extra pound of plastic? Well, the answer, you'd say, well, if every pound of plastic I get, the profit goes up by $3.40, you would probably say, well, then I should be willing to pay up to $3.40 additional. But the thing is, when we factored in these coefficients, how do we figure out we make $8 per dozen for every dozen space trays and $5 for every dozen zappers? We started by what we charged, that's the revenue, but then we subtracted out all the material we have. So the cost of that material was already factored in to this coefficient, right? It was already subtracted out. So the $3.40 doesn't represent the amount we should be willing to pay. It represents the premium above what we normally pay. Does that make sense? Like say we paid $5 per pound originally, then we shouldn't just be willing to pay $3.40. We should be willing to pay $8.40 because that shadow price represents the premium above what we normally pay. It's called a sunk cost. It's already, included cost. It's already included in that objective coefficient. All right, let's, it's about 7:30. Let's take like a 15-minute break. I'm going to come back and do one more sensitivity item, and then we're going to work on a problem together that kind of deals with all these sensitivity variables in once. And I think it's a good job, does a good job of explaining what these do. Okay? So take like a 15-minute break and come back. All right, so the last concept of sensitivity analysis we're going to go through tonight, and then I think we'll do an example. I think that might be the best way to show all these three things together. I'm going to show the shadow price, the range of optimality, the range of feasibility, and the fourth one, I guess fourth thing, is the reduced cost. Okay, now reduced cost, and that example I was kind of screwed up, so I want to quit using that example because there's something screwy with it. I don't know why. But the reduced cost, we only will have a reduced cost value if the thing we are deciding is 0 in the final solution. So let's use that example, but instead of using that example that's screwed up, if, for example, space rays, remember we were making $8 per dozen, and zappers, we were making $5 per dozen. Well, if in the final solution, I know this wasn't the case, but in the final solution, it ended up being make 700 space rays and no zappers, okay? or 700 zappers and 0 space rays. Because we make 0 of something, you'll get another value next to the range of optimality, and it's called the reduced cost. And it would be something like, in this case, let's say it's negative $2. We can interpret that two ways. The negative $2 means that for this to become positive, for it to be profitable for me to make any space rays, for it to become positive in the final solution, then this coefficient has to increase by the negative of the reduced cost. Okay, so the one way we can say is the negative of the objective coefficient increase of the variable necessary for the variable to be positive in the optimal solution. For this to become profitable for me to make it in this mix, the coefficient would have to increase by the negative of the reduced cost, right? Which is, it'd have to go up to $10 or higher, okay? If you think about it, it's like saying whatever goes in there, you know, we have to reduce the cost of making those dozens by $2. So that's what that is saying. Alternatively, it says, if we say the heck with it, we know in the final solution it says make 0 dozen space rays. If we say the heck with it and we force it to make a dozen space rays, our profit is going to go down, our overall profit is going to go down by the reduced cost. So when you see reduced cost, you can interpret it one of those two ways. You know, it's the reduction necessary, which means the increase in the profit needed for it to become positive. Alternatively, if we say the heck with it, we ignore it, we say, hey, we want to make a dozen space rays or increase that unit. That's fine, realizing though that it's going to decrease my profit by that amount each unit. So I don't feel like I did a great job explaining sensitivity report today. I don't know why, but I didn't have my A game for whatever reason. And I think if you know that, you know, and I know that. You know? So, anyways, no, I mean it. Yeah, I you know, some of you guys had me for probably, I don't know, 12 credits, 15 credits, and that was probably the worst lecture I've delivered in a long time. Really, I felt that way. You know, did you ever have one of those days?
Is this one making it on the internet?
Yeah, it's recorded. Hey, I'm human, right?
Wait, can I ask you a question?
Yeah, yes, you may.
So does that mean that the coefficient of the D10, is that what you're saying?
Yes.
For the 8? Now what was the other
There's-
other half of that?
There's two ways we can interpret, right? So the one way we can interpret is, hey, for it to be this to become positive, the objective function coefficient has to increase by the negative of that. I know that's kind of awkward to say, right? Because it has to go up to $10. But what we're saying is we have to reduce the cost of the things that go into that. And if we reduce the cost by $2, the profit goes up by $2,
Okay,
right? So that's why it's called reduced cost.
It's the same thing, you're just
Yes.
looking at it from different.
And the second thing says, if we say the hell with it, we know this is what it's putting forward. But if we say the hell with it, if we force a dozen space rays, the overall profit is going to go down by $2, right? If we ignore it, we say, okay, I don't care, we want some space rays being made, fine, but you're going to have to realize that you're moving, you know, production away from something more profitable, and it's going to cost you, right? It's going to cost you $2 per dozen. So that's how we interpret that. Now, what I'd like to do with the remainder of the class is, I think there's a nice one. It's a simple example. It was going to be for homework, but in lieu of other things, I would like us to do this together. So it is on page 107 and just 107. It is 26 and 27. And what I like about it is it's a production mix, which means it's pretty straightforward, but it deals with all those components, those four things. It deals with the range of optimality, it deals with shadow prices and the range of feasibility, and it also deals with reduced cost. So what I'd like you guys to do is take a shot at it, like at least, I'll tell you what, solve it. Okay, set it up and solve it. I'll do the same, and then we'll walk through the interpretation of all these things. Okay, so set it up, solve it with Excel, and then we'll walk through the interpretation. There's like multiple things like A, B, C, D. Okay, we'll walk through that together.
What number was it?
26 and 27, they're kind of together. It's a continuation. All right, so I don't want you to go too far. So let's take a look at what I have up there with Excel. So this is a production mix, and we are Mary's Bakery, and we make two products apparently today: custard pies and fruit pies. And we know we make about $15 per dozen for custard pies, $25 a dozen for fruit pies. And the things that are holding us back at this point are the ingredients. We have so many eggs, so much flour, so much sugar, and so much fruit mixture. And I believe I've captured those coefficients. So custard pies, for example, use 50 eggs, fruit pies use 40 eggs. And that has to be less than or equal to 500. And use 12 and 10 pounds respectively of the flour. So Mary wants to know, how many dozens of each. And these are in dozens, so it makes sense to leave it in non-integer. So let's have solver solve some things. And my objective function is E4. I'm going to maximize that. My changing cells, my decision variables are C2, D2. And luckily these all go in the same order. E6 through E9 is less than or equal to G6 through G9. Simplex LP, I can't make negative pi, so I'm checking that box. I'm going to solve. And as I solve that, I'm going to keep the sensitivity report. And it provides the following information. So it says make 4 2/3 dozen custard pies and 6 2/3 dozen fruit pies, which I can do, right? 4 dozens is 48 pies, 2/3 of a dozen. Well, that would be approximately 8 pies. So making 56 pies, 6 2/3 dozen, make basically 80 pies, okay? So if I'm Mary, I'm asking a few questions. Okay, what is holding me back? And first thing is, what is binding at this point? What is binding at this point? What is holding me back? And I got to look at the right-hand side constraints and see the things that are solved with equality. What are the things holding me back at this point? What am I out of? What have I used all of? Right, those are solved with equality. So 590, those are the things holding me back. But let's walk through the questions. I'm getting ahead of myself. Let's walk through the questions it asked me. It says, if Mary's could double profit on its custard pies, should more custard pies be produced? What do I need to analyze in the sensitivity report to answer this question? What is the thing I need to analyze in the sensitivity report to answer this question?
Allowable increase.
What's that?
Allowable increase.
For custard pies, right? My range of optimality for custard pies. Well, right now I'm making $15 per dozen. The allowable increase is $16.25, so add that, and I get $31.25. The allowable decrease is only $2.50, so I'm going to go down to $12.50. So any value in that range, means what? Does my solution change? My solution doesn't change, but what will change? What would change? Obviously, if I'm making now $30 per dozen for custard pies, my profit would change. But the solution itself is the decision variable, right? And that doesn't change. So let's see. That was what we looked at the range of optimality. That's what we told Mary. Let's see. Let's change that to 30, which is doubling it. Let's solve. Click solve. And you see that that's what happened. It stayed at 4 2/3 and 6 2/3. I'm going to go back to where it was. Okay, so the range of optimality we use to analyze that situation, right? To say, hey, what if the objective coefficient changes? Does it change the solution? And it tells us that that's a pretty robust solution, right? Even if we're off by a factor of, even if we undercut by a factor of, 100%, basically, we're okay. On the downside, we got, it looks like about 14-15% we could be off, right? So it's telling us that we know that's an estimate, but hey, we're pretty good. The fruit pies, the range of optimality, well, let's see. Fruit pies, we're currently charging $25. The allowable decrease is 13, so that's anywhere from 12. Allowable increase is 5 to 30. Okay, that's another. So anywhere in that range, it's the same solution. I think Let's see if we look at problem C. If Mary Custard raised the price and hence the profit on all pies by 25 cents, which translates to $3 per dozen, would the optional production schedule for the J change? Would the profit change? Well, as I said before, we can only look at those at one at a time. Now, if I change both, I can't really say if the range of optimality holds up. $3 is in the range of optimality here, and a $3 increase, that would be 18 bucks. And 28 is here, it's still in there. So I'm saying no, but there may be some interaction effect. In this case, what we'd have to do is try it. Put in 18, put in 28, whoops, put in 18, put in 28, resolve, and we're gonna see no change, right? The profit, of course, does change. The solution does not. Okay. Let's look at letter C. Suppose that Mary's found that 10% of its fruit mixture had been stored in containers that were not airtight. For quality and health reasons, it's decided it would be unwise to use any of the portion of the fruit mixture. That's very nice of Mary. How would this affect the optimal production schedule? All right. So let's take a look at fruit. How much of it did I use? The fruit mixture, how much of it did I use and how much do I have? I used 100 pounds and I have 120 pounds. So if 10% of that goes bad, it takes me from 120 down to what, 108. Because that's not a binding constraint, oh, you guys can't see that, I'm sorry. Because you guys can't, because it's not a binding constraint and still wouldn't become binding, would it change anything? It wouldn't. I'd have less inventory, I'd have less fruit mixture, so I lose that, but it wouldn't change this production run. Now let's see if we can visualize that in the shadow price. The shadow price is 0, meaning changing that right-hand side doesn't change profit if it's in the range of feasibility. And the range of feasibility is, let's see, we have 120 pounds. The allowable increase is infinity. So we can get an infinite amount of fruit. It doesn't, I mean, it'd be great to get an infinite amount of fruit mixture, but it doesn't change this production run because we're not using what we have, right? And we could lose, allowable decrease is 20. So anywhere from 100 to infinity, the shadow price is 0, meaning anything in that range, it doesn't affect the profit. Does that make sense? So losing 10%, it's not going to change anything. Let's try that out. Let's take that from 120 down to 108. We're going to resolve it. It's not binding. So the shadow price tells us nothing's going to happen, and nothing happened at all. Okay. Let's look at E. E says, Mary's Custard currently just pays $2.50 for a 5-pound bag of sugar from its bakery supply. So that means they currently pay 50 cents a pound. Okay, $2.50 for a 5-pound bag means 50 cents per pound. Its vendor has already made its deliveries for the day. If Mary's wishes it to purchase additional sugar, it must buy it from Donatelli's Market, a small local independent grocery store that sells sugar in 1-pound boxes for $2.25 a box. Should Mary purchase any box of sugar from Donatelli's Market? Explain. Okay, once again, sugar is binding, right? We have 90 pounds, we use 90 pounds. So it's going to have a positive shadow price. And if we look at it, it does. For sugar, it says the right-hand side of the tray is 90. We used all 90. Final value is 90. It has a shadow price of, let's just round that up and say $2.17. And that shadow price is valid in the range of feasibility, which allowable increase is 8 units, so up to 98. Down to allowable decrease is 50. That's the range of feasibility. So what that's saying is for every extra pound of sugar I get, my profit is going to go up by $2.17. But that's not what the question had asked me. It said I can go to Donatelli's and buy it for 50 cents or $2.25 per pound. Should I buy it? That's the question. Okay, you might say no, because it's kind of a trick question, because the shadow price is $2.17, so you're like, why would I buy it for $2.25 when my profit's only going to go up by $2.17? But what about sugar? When they figured out the coefficients, the 25 and 15, how do you think that was, I don't mean the pun, but baked in there, right? We sold the pies for whatever the amount is. What comes out of that? Well, the cost of eggs, the cost of flour, the production time, the cost of sugar. And the normal cost of sugar is 50 cents per pound. That's already factored into those coefficients. Does that make sense? It's an included cost. So remember when I told you the shadow price, the $2.17, represents the premium above what we normally pay. Well, what we normally pay is what? 50 cents. So we should be willing to pay up to $2.67 per pound for a box of sugar. Does that make sense? Because 50 cents of that is going to be absorbed in that coefficient. Yes, no? This 15 and this 25, when someone figured this out, when Mary figured this out, she knows, hey, for a dozen pies, the revenue coming in is $50. But I'm backing out $35 worth of eggs, flour, sugar, fruit mixture. That's how I arrive at 15. So it's an included cost. So I'm already absorbing that up top. So it's a premium above what we normally pay. I'm not sure if that is clear, but it's an included cost. So that's how we interpret those shadow prices. And how many extra pounds can she do that for? That she can buy and her profit would go up. Right, roughly, right, 8. So the model increase is 8, so 8 pounds. Let's move to 27. It says each pie is baked and sold in an aluminum pie tin. Suppose it is the start of the day. Mary's custard had 200 pie tins available. Would the production schedule change for that determined in part A of problem 29? Well, let's see. I'm just going to sum this up just so we have, whoops, go to home here. Let's sum up. That's how many dozen I make. So equal F2 times 12. So right now, I'm making 136 pies in the current production run. So if someone added a constraint that says we only have 200 pie tins available, would that change anything? No, because we're not adding a binding constraint. But if someone said, actually we only have, and this is part B, we only have 100 pie tins available, is it going to change things? It is, because we're adding a binding constraint. Let's do it just to see. So I'm going to go down here to tins. What would the coefficient be for pie tins? Remember the units for up here. Right. For every one up here, I'm using 12 pie tins. And I'm making 136 pies. So if I go to solver, and I tell it about that new constraint, B10 less than B10, very good. I click solve. It's definitely going to give me another solution, and it's going to lower my amount. Remember, because I'm constraining myself more. All right, I'm going to get rid of that constraint. And let's look at answer letter C. Letter C says, Mary Custards has in the past made a third type of pie, a chocolate pie. Given the current prices of ingredients, Mary customers estimate that it would net a profit of $27 per dozen for chocolate pies. And then it has the unit cost. So what I want to do here is I want to add this smartly. So I'm going to highlight the last portion, the last decision variable. I'm going to right click, I'm going to say insert. I'm going to put chocolate in the middle. Why am I going to do that? Because if I insert in an array like that, it'll just adjust the endpoints for me. That's exactly what I wanted to do. And now it's just a matter of me adding the coefficients. So chocolate pies make $27 per dozen. How many eggs does it use? It looks like they use 30 eggs. Looks like it uses 15 pounds of flour, 12 pounds of sugar, and we don't put fruit in our chocolate pies. So what's nice is because I added it in the middle of the range and I go to solver, it adjusted everything appropriately. Now I am maximizing F4 instead of E4.
Dr. Mika,
Yeah.
can you put the Excel thing up, please?
Did you guys add in the middle? Yes, okay. So I'm maximizing F4 by changing variable cells C2 to E2, and F6 through F9 less than or equal to H6 through H9. So because I had in the middle, it adjusted everything over for me appropriately. If I click solve, it's going to give me a solution, and I'm going to keep that sensitivity report that goes along with that solution. Now, the solution remains the same. It says, don't make any chocolate pies. Make 4 2/3 dozen custard pies, 6 2/3 dozen fruit pies. If I look at the sensitivity report, what do you notice that chocolate pies has up in the top part that custard and fruit pies do not have? It has a reduced cost. The reduced cost is negative 1.5. So interpret that for me. What is that saying? What is that saying? Okay, if I force it to make a dozen chocolate pies, and I can do that, the profit's going to go down by $1.50. What else does it mean?
Charge $1.50 more to make a profit.
Okay. For it to become non-zero in the final solution, I have to make at least $1.50 more, right? So if I go up to 28 here, let's try it. If I go up to 28 here and I resolve, it's still going to say, sorry, we're not making any chocolate pies. If I go up to 29, I'm beyond that $1.50 threshold, it's going to start making chocolate pies. It's going to become non-zero in the final solution. Does that make sense? So if I go back to, let's go back to the original, let's go to 27. I'm going to resolve it, and it's not going to make any of my chocolate pies. But I'm going to say, the hell with it, I want to make a dozen chocolate pies. I'm going to go to solver. I'm going to go to add. And I'm going to add a constraint to force it. I'm going to say D2 has to be greater than or equal to 1. So I'm going to force it basically to make a dozen chocolate pies. A constraint forces it to do something. What's going to happen to this 236.67? It's going to decrease by what? $1.50. So click solve. OK. It went down. It forced a dozen pies, and my profit went down by $1.50. Okay, so you'll only see a reduced cost if the final value is 0. Okay. You'll only it's a kind of a stupid rule, but it's called the rule of complementary slackness, which means that either the final value is 0 or the reduced cost is 0. Right? So one of those is going to be 0. Either the final value, like the how many we're making, or the reduced cost is 0. In this case, the reduced cost is 0, but the final value is not. In this case, the final value is 0, but the reduced cost is not. Okay. So that was all 4 of those things in one nutshell. And you can see as a manager how you might use those things. You would get a solution. You would say, hey, here's what we're doing. But you would want to go further into that. Do some what-if analysis. Say, well, how good is this solution? And what if this variable was off? And what's holding me back? And if I get some more of that thing that's holding me back, what does that mean to my final solution? And how many is that good for? And then what becomes binding? So it allows you to go deeper into the solution. And it's good because you can look at alternatives, but it's also good because if you think about it, when we baked this, we made this model we have all kind of assumptions that we have to make that we say, hey, they're violated in practice. So, for example, we look at the range of optimality, we can say, well, you know what? Okay, I know we're just kind of estimating, you know, we make $15 for custard pies and $25 for fruit pies. But even if we're off, you know, anywhere in this range, you know, we're still doing the right thing, which gives me a little bit of confidence in my solution. Okay, gives me a little confidence. So that is sensitivity analysis. Here is what I would like you to do for homework. This is on page 101, 110. So we're done with chapter 2 this week. Next week we're going to move into chapter 3 and we're going to do something called summation variables. And we'll probably get to integer and binary constraints. And a lot of these are continuations of stuff we started this week. So I want you to do 2B and C. We did 2A last week, so do 2B and C. I want you to do 3B and C. We did 3A, I believe, last week. I want you to do 24. We just did 26 and 27. And I'd like you to do 28 and 29. I think we did 28 at least last week. But I want you to do 28 and 29. And I want you to interpret the shadow prices and the range of optimality for that. Okay, so I want you to go through the sensitivity report and analyze that for 28 and 29. So not really a new model. We're going to start doing new models after next week, but you know, a new layer on top of that. So not just a solution, but how good is that solution? What are the conditions where that solution holds up? All right. Have a good evening, and I will see you next week. Sure.
When I run my sensitivity report, this is all that
Yes,
shows
you
up.
put up there. This map.
This is driving me nuts.
All right,
I'm
this-
not able to follow you at all.
Okay, that's all. Select that solving method. Change it to the Georgia.
This one?
Yeah, change that to simplex LP.
Okay.
Click solve. Click sensitivity. I'll let you how you use it. There you go.
All right, thank
That's all
you.
it was. That's
All
not
right.
really. That in particular is not a Mac issue.
Yeah, no, there's a bunch of stuff.
All right.
I have a question. So I'm having an issue with trying to even do the constraints online.
Okay.
So like I can do all
Is
this.
this Mac too?
Yeah. So I like, the only problem is, so I tried to do this, if I hit add, this is what happens. And I think it's a Mac issue, but it says, you know, solvers,
Oh, it should work.
yeah, and it says solvers available on like my version of the Excel, so there's no way for me to like open
X
it.
out of that or red out. Okay, so you need 6, 9, if you solve this, it doesn't solve?
No,
What's the difference?
that's correct.
Yes, yes. If you click solve, what happens?
It's, I don't understand.
Well, it doesn't.
I just hit something wrong.
I see that they're all your.
Yeah, they do. Yeah, they change. So I know I did that right.
They already have.
Because it was happening to me last week, and I tried to figure it out after. And I can't get it. It's okay.
Flour, you got a coefficient.
Does it matter that I have 0 in there? No, I meant for the fruit mix on the.
No, you should have a 0.
Okay.
Yeah, you should have a 0.
No, I'll read it no matter what, but I read the last one on Wednesday. We read the whole class, yeah, so. I can't go because I work like 9 to 4.
All right, so that's all right. I mean, everything
Okay.
there is set up right.
Yeah, it's a lot. Well, there's an A and a B again.
Should I just try to like redo it like?
Make sure you're ready for
Objective
class.
function, that's it. You're maximizing C3, and it should be E5.
See you, bud.
Okay, so,
So it works. So it's not the math.
okay, good. Because I kept trying and I couldn't, because the first time I did it, I know I
Uh-huh.
clicked it on that, but I don't know if it's because then I couldn't
Yeah,
get
it
the
could have been, right,
constraints
sure.
box.
Yeah, you probably thought you
come
were
up.
one and was it, yeah.
That was my problem, like, and it doesn't let me maximize it at all, and I was like Googling around and I saw like other people
What
have
doesn't, what doesn't let you maximize?
So, like, if I would come here and hit solver,
Uh-huh.
so if I go to add my constraint,
Oh,
I can't see.
how did you get them in there in the first place?
I was like looking at your example of like what the box was, so then I could just do like the add constraint, and then I kind of like just tabbed over after I would do it.
Wow, so you can't see.
Mm-mm. And I'm gonna look into it more, but there were other people with my same version of this Excel that were having this issue. Like I can't even maximize it. It doesn't even give you the option. So I couldn't see what I was doing.
Oh, I see. So when that pop-up comes,
Yeah, and then
it's always that. So you're just kind of like going by,
yeah, and that's why, I don't know if
Oh,
that's
man.
why maybe I screwed it up.
yeah, that's easy to do.
Because I was like, I don't know what I'm
So
seeing.
you were Googling around and what were people saying in
The
Google?
exact same thing. No one has
The
a,
solution.
yeah, I couldn't find a solution, so I'm gonna try to figure out other ways to Google this problem. But I was like, solver, constraint, I mean, there's not,
Huh.
it's hard to really say what you're trying to accomplish. But it's not like this is an add-in. Like this one came with this version of Excel.
Okay,
So it's not like this is a third party add-in for the solver.
right.
So that's why I'm like, I just don't understand why it did that glitch like that.
I see what you're
So
saying.
that's why I like got right behind because I was like, I don't even know how to put it in there.
Oh, I see what you're saying.
Do you have a Mac? Does your constraint box work?
I don't have Excel. He knows that one pretty well then.
Yeah, it doesn't make sense to me why it's doing that.
No one had a solution to it.
I couldn't find, I'm gonna look around
What
again.
version of Excel do you have?
It's 2011, so
2011. I didn't know there
How
was a
how new is
2011.
your Mac that?
Max 2010.
It's
Yeah,
like, I have a brand new Mac, like I have a 2016, and when I tried to install like older software, it couldn't get on.
well, and that's the thing. So like, and then I was looking up, you know, the specs for like the solver and data analysis pack, and the solver came with this version of my Excel, because I even checked my version of my Excel to make sure it was the right one, and then the data solver is what you have to add in, because that's what I used to do for my undergrad, was add it in.
You solved in your undergrad?
No, the data
Data
pack,
analysis?
yeah. I used that in my undergrad, and you would have to always add that in by like a third party, but the solver's in there.
Sure, yeah, it's in it.
Do you think IT would have any? Probably not. I just submitted a work order to get it emailed. That bothered me. For an employee email.
Do you,
Yeah, Excel doesn't support Macs.
what's that? You work at the golf shop?
Yeah, I'm the interim head coach.
That's right, from your stuff.
Yeah.
So, what do you guys have at the golf shop? Do you have a PC up there?
Well, Derek has the issued one. I don't have like an issued laptop.
A university laptop?
Yeah.
And that'll work, or, I mean, I don't know, that, to me,
It's
is
weird.
crazy. The other thing, we're gonna have a lab downstairs, I mean, you can use that.
I mean, I'm sure. Like,
You don't ever have to do this in class, is what I'm saying.
Okay.
Like, it's only for a take-home, so.
Okay.
So, you know, it's where you use Excel.
Yeah.
Like, you have to follow along in class, but you don't have to.
Okay.
Like he's not. But, you know, you have to find somewhere where you can do it.
Yeah.
Right, so if you have someone, you know, you can
Yeah,
borrow.
like all my coworkers have like the issued.
The
company
ThinkPad,
one,
well,
yeah.
no, the ThinkPad, yeah. I don't know, I've never seen that.
I was like so confused sitting over there, and I was
Yeah,
like,
no, that's weird, I see what you're saying. I mean, it looks like you understand what you're doing though, which is a good thing.
yeah, I'm fine putting it all together, and then it was just
Yeah.
I was like, I don't even know if I'm doing it right because I couldn't
Right,
really
that's
see
odd.
what I was doing.
Yeah, that's
So
odd.
okay, I just want to make sure.
But as you can see, I can't even click over it.
I know, and that's what like
Yeah.
just blowing my mind. So, I mean, I can make it work. It's a pain, but I'm just glad I at least now.
No, you got the concept, it was just, you know, the interface was
weird glitch.